Next item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Do we have any comments regarding the agenda?
Mr. President, I would like to suggest that we move the committee reports item 9A Finance before 7B, the preliminary budget and goals. So the report of the Finance Committee. And then move item 9B, which is the Policy Committee, and move that before the topics for action 6A.
Okay, any additional discussion regarding the agenda? And I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda as amended.
So moved.
We have a motion by Mr. Kaisershot. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Holland. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion is approved. The next item on the agenda is approval of the July 18, 2006 regular and closed session Board of Education.
I would move for approval of the minutes as presented in the packet.
We have a motion for the approval of regular and closed session Board of Education meeting minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion is approved. Next item is correspondence, and as I understand it, we have correspondence.
Yes,
Mrs.
we
Crimmins.
have correspondence. We have three thank yous for flowers delivered to families of district employees who had family members pass away. The father of the head girls basketball coach, thank you from Dave Johnson for those flowers. On the death of Bob Benoit's father, a thank you from the family for those flowers. And the father of Tammy Zacharias, who's a noonday duty supervisor at Hudson Prairie, a thank you from her for the flowers. And then we also have thank you from Vicki Donatel, a fourth grade teacher from North Hudson who retired, thanking us for the gift certificate that we gave to her for Back to Books. And she does say that she enjoyed teaching in Hudson schools and that it's been an honor and a pleasure to work with the students in our districts. And so that's all the correspondence.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next topic, which is, I believe, the Policy Committee report. And Ms. Havish-Aline.
We decided, seeing the list for policies for our action is so long that it merits some explanation by the committee of some of our decisions and how we came about making those decisions. Basically, what you have in your packet are the policies that are either duplicates of other policies, policies that are no longer required by statute, or are legally advised, or that we do not need to have in there legally. out of date, no longer consistent with practice. Those that, there were quite a few that we moved that were really more procedure rather than overall policy that would guide this board, that needed to be moved into procedure for, and guidelines for administrators. So there were quite a few that were placed in that spot, and some that were just not necessary for the board policy or administrative procedure and guidelines. And with that said, with that whole list there, we are at the point now that we've kind of gone through them enough that we have the manuals will be together by Friday. They're still big. We're still working on it. We have meetings scheduled now until January to review the portions that haven't been reviewed yet. But you will have the manuals available to you on Friday. So they're too big to ship out. So if you can pick up your manual Friday or soon thereafter, so that you can see it all in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions regarding that report? If not, we'll move on for topics for action. We have consent items, personnel, and expenditures. Expenditures are in the amount of $1,630,412.64. And then in addition to that, we have the list of policies to be deleted. So I'll entertain a motion for approval of the consent items.
Mr. President, I move approval of the consent items as presented.
We have a motion from Mr. Holland. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Ms. Haber-Chalene. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion is approved. We move on to Agenda 6B, I believe, with elementary long-term space for learning options for further consideration. Mr. Minnick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think what I'm going to do tonight is try and be as brief as possible. And when I say brief, really give more of an overview of the the working session that the board had out at the YMCA camp, looking at the options and solutions for elementary space needs. And if I could, I'm going to just take a minute or so to kind of summarize kind of how we got to where we are. We had the, and I know I'm going to be redundant, but I thought that based on having been a working session and this being an official board meeting, that it was appropriate to revisit the how we got to the options that are in front of you tonight. Really, we had 7 options that came in front of the board, and I'm just quickly going to run through them. We had option A, build a kindergarten center. Option B, build a 5th grade center. We had option C, which was to build a new 4-section elementary school. We had option D, which was to add on at North Hudson and add on at Holden Elementary. Option E was to purchase portable classrooms. Option F, run a multi-track schedule at EP Rock and Hudson Prairie. And then option G was to increase the maximum class size guidelines. And I'll briefly talk a little bit this evening on an option H that came in front of us from Mr. Hermsen. So essentially, the facilities committee was recommending to the board at the work session that 3 of them be eliminated pretty much immediately, and those were options E, F, and G. E was the portable classrooms, and F was the multi-track schedule, and G was to increase the maximum class sizes. So essentially what came to the full board at the work session were really 4 remaining options. And I'm going to maybe editorialize here quickly. I think the board quickly eliminated 2 of them, option A and option B, which was to build, option A was build a kindergarten center, and B, build a 5th grade center. So what you did was really focus on 2 options, which were options C and D. And C was to build a new 4-section elementary school for 588 students. Option D was to add on at North Hudson and Holton Elementary to bring both of those up to capacities of 588, consistent with EP Rock and Hudson Prairie. It was also at that time that Mr. Hermson came in front of the board at the working session and talked about what I'll just call option H, which is to institute a local levy educational tax credit. We asked the superintendent to, and I'll defer to her here in a minute, but we asked the superintendent to work with or select an architectural firm to develop cost estimates on our options C and D. I'm not so sure the board needs to take action tonight to officially recognize that we have the 2 options that came out of the working session, but I think it is probably appropriate that the members maybe speak to the 2 options that are remaining. If there are some issues that seem to be paramount, I think this would probably be the evening to discuss and have further dialogue on. So if I'm going to just choose my words carefully here and just say that I think what the consensus of the board at the working session at the Y camp was that we were going to move forward with 2 options, options C and D, further define them, further develop cost estimates. Then that brings us to option H, which again I referred to Mr. Hermson as instituting a local levy educational tax credit. I think that we kind of made a promise to Mr. Hermson that we would hear him out and ask for some further information. I know there were some legal concerns on the part of the board members as to whether that was an issue that we could properly address based on state statute. So I think we obviously tonight don't have our cost estimates back. I see Mr. Hermson is in the audience tonight. I think, again, in the spirit of fair play and giving Mr. Hermson an opportunity, I would maybe ask him, again, coming out of the working session, that kind of do the same things with his option H that we have asked an architectural firm to do on options C and D. Further define it, give us some cost estimates, and I think there's concerns on the part of the board of what's the impact on the number of students, when will the space be available based on his scenario, and then obviously what would be the financial implications to the school district. I think that my concern, and I'm just going to speak as one board member, is that the task that we've had has been very specific to a space solution, and I think we've been diligent about our work to establish class size ranges, and been diligent to establish capacities of the schools. We've taken a look at short-term solutions, which are going to involve some busing and capping of classes. And then very specifically, the board asked our superintendent to come back to us with long-term solutions, knowing that our crunch really kind of hits 2008, 2009, opening school of September 2008. So I don't know, and again, I don't want to speak for the other board members, but I don't know where Mr. Hermson's option on a basis of solving a space issue at the elementary levels addresses that. I'm not so sure it's an apples to apples or oranges to oranges comparison. But again, I think out of the spirit of fairness, I think just like we've asked the architect to come back with further definitions and costs in C and D, I think it's fair to ask Mr. Hermson to come back with further definition on option H, and even know if we can even be in the realm of addressing that. So I've talked to Mr. Chair longer than I expected to, but again, I just kind of wanted to set the scenario or kind of frame it up on the discussion of the options that you have in front of the board this evening. I'll take any questions.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Minnick based on his report? If not, I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Bowen-Ingebrod to discuss one other item as it relates to the options that we're looking at, and that would be a variation of option C to take into account some potential space needs for early childhood children. So,
Thank you, Mr. President. As we moved forward from the work session to start thinking about what we needed to do to prepare for the architect, to talk to them about programming the space so that they could provide you cost estimates of that space, we started to talk more about what was in each of the options C and D. And as we did that and we talked about option C, we realized that there was, inside that, there was an expectation that we needed space for early childhood students to provide for them. And so as we looked at not only space for regular ed classrooms and how many classrooms we needed there, we also looked across the district at special ed space and the growth in the district, not only of our regular ed population, but that would translate into a similar growth in special ed students. We would expect that. And knowing where those programs are located at the present time, we felt that it was very important for us to think about where that space might be. And so we talked about putting it into option C and having the architects work with that and give you cost figures with early childhood space within that option C. But yet we hadn't talked about that at the work session. So we felt it was very important for us to look at option C separately and then to ask you to consider option C with an addition of the 2 classrooms for early childhood in space that would support the needs of those students. So I'm going to turn it over to Nancy Sweet to talk more specifically about this option since you haven't seen it in this form before, and to detail it and answer any questions that you have.
And this is on page 101 in your board book. The Facilities Planning Task Force, I know, considered a kindergarten early childhood center, and I think it was primarily a kindergarten center, and because there were similar age children required to be served in early childhood, it was perhaps combined. And the center concept was much bigger, I think, than the classroom space that we're advising in this modified option C with some support space. But it's related to an earlier discussion that the Facilities Planning Task Force had. This particular option, unlike the center option, provides only the classroom space, and we're proposing 2 classroom spaces and associated therapy space. The preschool children ages 3 to 5 would share other indoor and outdoor space with the K-5 population. And we identified this, as Mary said, brought it forward. We really don't want it to be forgotten. You know, the early childhood program requires space just like our K-12 programs do. And our current school space is not adequate. it's too small. Our only school space right now exists at Willow River, and it's a partial-size classroom. The space those children need for therapy is down the hall and around the corner. Again, not sufficient. We're making it work, but it's not the best situation. And this year, and earlier, a couple months ago, the board approved another contract for another session of early childhood to be moved to a community setting, which we will lease and pay for. And because our early childhood programs, which were previously housed in our various school settings, we needed to move them out into community settings in order to provide for that K-5 enrollment. So I don't want the board to forget the need, and the proposal of option C modified is that we provide for this space more appropriately in this new elementary setting. And you can see laid out on page 101 the advantages and some of the disadvantages. All of the options have both, but we feel that there's more advantage to doing it this way than disadvantage.
Okay, thank you. Well, at this point, do you have anything else to add, Superintendent? Okay. I'd open this up for board discussion. Likely, board members may have some questions regarding this additional provision to option C. I know I have a question just as it relates to the sort of the location and the busing of students, and is that much of a concern as it relates to where we have this program situated? And I suppose ideally a centralized location, or
ideally a centralized location. We did indicate that there may be a disadvantage for a child or two who might live furthest, from the location of the new elementary, depending on where it's located.
and right now we're to deal with that program. We're using some of the existing space at Willow River, and then, as I understand, we're also using we're leasing some space at another location.
And Special Children's Center, is actually located southern part of our district as well, and there are some children from the northern part of the district that are being bused there, but still within a reasonable length of time. We would still, just to clarify, we would still, and we're required to have a continuum of placement options for preschool children with disabilities. So we would continue our relationship with the YMCA, for example. We have an integrated program there for children who benefit from that kind of program model. And we also have a teacher that actually moves around to nursery schools, private schools, homes, other settings, and serves some children with disabilities in that way. And we're required really by law to consider the least restrictive setting. But there are other populations of children who need a more direct service model. And those are the children that we're talking about for the school-based program.
Okay, thank you. Other board members?
Mr. President.
Mr. Kaisershop.
Ms. Sweet, and I guess I think I know the way this is going, but I just want to make sure I understand. I guess, preference for a central location really doesn't present the option of taking more space at Willow River versus having these sections available at a new school, does it? I mean, would that be such a paramount concern that should be looked at?
I think we should continue to look at that as we go through the planning phases. But we looked at, we've had several meetings, and we've identified other special education programs and other programs like English language learners. And there is a need to distribute those programs more equitably throughout the district. And as that population grows, we're looking at space in our existing buildings for those programs as well. And the reason for proposing that early childhood be designed into this new building is because of the nature of the program and all of the related therapy that these children need. And it impacts the design of the facility more than our services to English language learners or children with learning disabilities. You don't really need specially designed space, but you do for this population, and it presents us with an opportunity to do this in the appropriate way, and we've never yet had that opportunity to do it.
If I could, Mr. President, just one more question for Ms. Sweet. Given the fact that it sounds like we're just making do at Willow River and using space in the community, although you just mentioned that we'll continue to do that under some circumstances.
Some of it we would give up.
Sure. Is 2 classrooms going to be sufficient for our needs for the foreseeable future?
Yes, I think
It will.
so. Yeah, I think so. We've looked at, again, given the fact that we have the continuing integrated programs, we have the itinerant model, yes.
Okay.
In terms of what we know now, and in terms of reasonable projections for the program.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other board member questions, comments?
Mr.
Holland.
President, Ms. Sweet, it seems that this need has been kind of forgotten in a sense, or we've kind of forgotten about it. And so now we're moving to try to address it at a later point, but of course it's important to address. Should the same needs be addressed in potential other options that are before us? For example, would the same opportunities be available in option D, renovation of 2 elementary schools? I mean, should we look at that as well and incorporate that into the planning if this is a need that's been isolated? So,
I think so. Yeah.
I think that's a good point, and
Good point.
possibly when we're putting together the costs for each of the options, that we could also take that into account for option D. Other board member comments, questions?
Mr. Chair, I have more of a
Minnick.
comment. I noticed Mr. Tooley from SDS Architects is here this evening. And just a real quick comment before I get to my question. And I know that the board asked our superintendent to work with an architectural firm, and I know that she talked to at least 2, possibly more. Ultimately, SDS was selected, and I just want to say that I'm very comfortable with that selection, and I'm going to say that for 2 reasons. And one is that SDS is very familiar with the district, but I think secondly, and probably more important, is that I think they've got a good handle on remodeling projects. SDS did Little River, and that was about as tough a project as you're going to find. So I think they understand very well the additions and remodeling and matching up old and new and working with existing HVA systems, et cetera. So I'm comfortable with SDS on this cost estimates for our options. That leads into my question then for Mr. Toohig, is the 2 classrooms that we were talking about, that Ms. Sweet talked about. I'm going to assume, Mr. Toohig, that it's reasonably easy to program that and develop the costs like we've done or are asking as part of the study on the remaining classroom space.
Mr. Toohey, could I ask you to come to the microphone and state your name? And thank you.
I'm Tom Twig with SDS Architects.
Go ahead, thank you.
But sure, I think we can just add it to the programs that we'd be developing for the different options. You know, there's some specifics to the design of these spaces that would have to be programmed in, so I think it could easily be added into the programs.
Does that include, Mr. Chair, running both options, including the new elementary as well as the additions at Holton and North Hudson, like Mr. Holland alluded to?
Yeah, it certainly could. I think from the discussions we've had earlier, it was just for the new elementary option, but you could certainly, you know, add it to the other Holton and North Elementary.
And I would suggest North in particular. Holton is, again, way up there. Not Central,
Way up there.
way up there.
Well, we do have the two extremes. You know,
Yeah,
the option
we
to
do.
the far north.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, it would be my sense in fairness to, you know, both options that, you know, that provision be, you know, costed out in both options so that the board can, you know, weigh that in their decision in terms of the options that we're going to be looking at in the future, so.
Sure.
I would just like to defer so that we could have a little more time to talk about the location for the addition option, just because we need to look at it in relationship to all special ed space in the district and distribution of that space. It may very well end up in option D at North Hudson, but we do need to look at distribution of that space first.
Okay. Any other board member comments, questions? Thank you, Mr. Toohey.
Mr. Chair, I do have just one quick question, Mr. Toohey. I just thought of it when we were talking about North Hudson. That's the one facility that we have a joint facility or joint usage in terms of cafeteria and gymnasium.
Right.
Are you, I think I know the answer, I'll ask it anyway. Are you, in your cost estimates, looking at separate facilities as part of that program?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And as you should be.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I think at this point, we'll sort of continue to move in that direction with those options and variation of the option. And I think Mr. Hermsen, if he presents us with some additional information regarding his option, we'll certainly take a look at that as well. So at the next meeting, it's my understanding that we'll have that cost information before us so that the board can review that and ask any additional questions and further evaluate those options. With that, we'll move on to the architectural services proposal. We've already touched on that in the previous item of discussion, but I'll turn that over to Superintendent Von Ekenbrod.
And since Tom Twig has already been introduced, that was part of my role here. I do want to just let you know that following the work session, I contacted 2 architectural firms who were familiar with the district facilities, because that was very important for us to get that information that you need to make decisions. So I asked them to submit proposals to us for a very limited scope, and that was for concept, drawings, and a cost, the budget, so that you could make decisions and know what each of these options that you're considering, what they cost. And so they will be looking at the sites, looking at the footprint of the buildings on those sites, the required amount of space that we would need, and that's why we talked about what programming we need in each of these buildings. And so I contacted ATS&R, which is very familiar with our buildings through their work with the task force, and then SDS, as Mr. Minnick talked about, and their familiarity with the district as well. ATS&R submitted a proposal to us for $4,500, and then SDS submitted a proposal to us that's in your packet for $4,400. Part of their charge was to prepare information for you and share that at the August 29th meeting. So as we just talked about, that will help in your decision-making at that time. And Tom is here to answer any other questions you have and talk a little bit about the services that this proposal speaks to. Tom?
Well, I don't think I'm really going to add too much besides what's in that proposal, but we're just going to take a look at, the different options, the UU and the FF site. And I think some of the biggest issues are utilities, the FF site. We're looking at extending utilities out there in the UU site, since it's not going to be annexed, would have on-site utilities. So those are some of the biggest issues there. And then as far as the buildings themselves, we'll be looking at, the same program spaces for the new elementary school, and then adding to North Hudson and to Holton, to make them equally sized schools. So if you have any questions specifically, we are going to work with SEH, who we used in some other studies. They're familiar with the Hudson Township. They've done a lot of work for the city, and they provide information to us on on-site septic and wells and that type of thing.
Thank you, Mr. Toohey. Do we have any questions from the board? Either for him or regarding the proposal? Superintendent?
I would just like to add one thing. This proposal does not commit us to any further services. It really is for this concept design and then for the budget. So just so that you know that, there is a comment in here that Mr. Toohey makes in regard to if they would be selected as the architects to carry out this work in the future, then we would be credited back the amount that is in the proposal.
Thank you. So what we're voting on this evening is the approval of this proposal from SDS. And I think board members have the proposal before them, including the cost for their doing this preliminary service. Any board members have any questions, or someone wish to make a motion for the approval of the proposal?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Minnick makes a motion of approval of the proposal. We have a second.
I'll second that.
We have a second from Mr. Kaisershaw. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed? The motion is approved. The next item before us is the 06-07 transportation agreement with Somerset School District. Ms. Sweet?
This agreement is on page 111. It is a new agreement with the Somerset School District. Both they and us, our students, are provided transportation services through Safeway. And this agreement allows us to share the cost of transporting students to and from specialized programs in the metro area for this coming school year. And with this agreement, we would be paying 1/3 of the cost, and they would be paying 2/3. So it's a considerable savings to us, and it does not disadvantage the student at all.
Thank you. Any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion for approval of this transportation agreement.
Mr. President, I move the approval of this transportation agreement as indicated in the packet.
We have a motion from Mr. Holland. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Trish Haba-Shaleen. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion is approved. The next item is selection of the delegate to the 2007 WASB Delegate Assembly. It's my understanding that Mr. Minnick has served this role in the past, and from the reports that I've received, he's done a very honorable job in that role, and I think he's even hinted about his desire to do this job again.
I'll volunteer.
Okay. that said, is there, anyone want to make, do we have to have a motion on this? Okay, let's go ahead and have a motion for approval. Mr. Minnick serving as the primary delegate for the Hudson School District to the Delegate Assembly of the WASP in January.
Mr. President, I'd be honored to make that motion.
We have a motion from Mr. Kaisershot. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Ms. Havish-Aline. Any discussion? Okay. Ms. Crimmins raises a good point in terms of having an alternate to Mr. Minnick. Mr. Kaisershot, are you open to amending your motion to include an alternate?
Yes, I am, Mr.
Okay.
President.
Is someone on the board willing to serve as an alternate to Mr. Minnick?
I will.
Okay, someone boldly step forward here. So Tracy Havish-Aline will serve as the alternate delegate. So if we can make that amendment to the motion and to the second made, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion is approved. Next item are reports. We have the 2005-06 WKCE and MAP test results. Reports from Sandy Kovac.
This year's Wisconsin Knowledge of Hudson's exams are Wisconsin's response to the No Child Left Behind legislation. The WKCE is primarily an accountability test. So part of tonight is just to realize there's a purpose for that test that gives it a different flavor than some of the other tests we use throughout the district. The law, No Child Left Behind law, requires that all students in grades 3 through 8 and once in high school are tested in reading and math, and then in science, once in 5, once in grades 6 through 8, and then again once in 10 through 12. And since the tests are new this year in 3 through 8 and 10th grade, it really is again another baseline year. So we kind of lost some of our time data, and we're really starting over again throughout the state. We need to remind ourselves that any assessment, such as the WKCE, really is a snapshot in time. It's one piece of evidence. And so that we want to look at different data points before making any kind of generalizations or conclusions. The No Child Left Behind legislation requires states to establish adequate yearly progress, or AYP as we often hear, targets that all school districts must reach each year with the goal that all students will be proficient, 100% will be proficient in reading and math by 2013-14. In addition, there's two other objectives that they look at: attendance, graduation, as well as participation. I may take this a little sidewalk here because I want to remind you that we are all very welcome. We enjoy accountability. We want to do that. We want to examine data by subgroup and make plans for improvement. But you need to know that that law, No Child Left Behind, does have a major flaw with the students with disabilities and English language learners. Because the law sets those absolutes that all students must be proficient by 2013-14. So it's in direct conflict with our other law, Individuals with Disabilities Act, or IDEA, because No Child Left Behind is saying all students are equal and must be proficient at WKCE.
Sandy, excuse me. Tim, could you give her the microphone so that we can, so both members of the, in the audience as well as our TV viewers. Okay. Thank you.
That feels a little strange. Okay. All right, so we're talking about there's a conflict between No Child Left Behind legislation and IDEA, in that the No Child Left Behind is assuming all students are equal, where IDEA is recognizing that students are different. And so you just need to know that it's just really a matter of time when you're looking at those populations and looking at 100% proficient that almost all districts will be labeled as failing. That's just a fact of the law, the way it stands currently. If we look at the current season with baseball, it would be like saying to a baseball team, you're going to be 162-0 as your record, or you're going to be failing. All right, 100% passing. As we look, at this year's data, we do see for this year that we did make AYP targets. So you can see in every category, yes is satisfactories, we did make that target. But I wanted to make that point of, if something comes up as not making AYP, most likely it will be in those two areas that conflict with the IDEA. For the past 2 days, our building teams from all 7 sites have been participating in the SMART goal training. We mentioned last spring that we had received funding with an Education Foundation grant. And so there were 50 staff members in the room. So about 7, middle school had 12, but teachers from every site going through a process of examining their data and then developing SMART goals. The energy in the room was absolutely awesome. I mean, teachers really digging into their data and looking at both the overall building and district data and then what I call kind of taking off the layers of the onion and digging deeper. And so a little bit of what I want to share tonight is how we were kind of digging down deeper a little bit. When we look overall at WKCE, and here's the reading for fall 2005, you can see that in every category, when we compare Hudson with the state, we are above the state level. And again in math, every grade level, Hudson's above the state. And when we looked at some of our CISA 11 districts and did some comparison, very strong again. What we did do then is we started unpeeling the layers, and we talked a little bit about this before, is we started looking now a little broader throughout the state for some very high-performing districts to benchmark against. When we start peeling away at the layers of that onion in a few ways, we took those state tests and started looking by strand. Because sometimes we can be very strong overall, but there might be a strand within that data, like in math. Maybe measurement was low, even though everything else was high. So that we can really start focusing on strands and or overall. What we really started finding too is some of those high-performing districts really had differences when we looked at the data 2 ways. When we look at it advanced and proficient, which is what the state usually publishes, not bad. We might be a few percentage points from some of the high-performing districts. But when we looked at just that advanced category, it really gave us a challenge. And you can see, and this was in your packet again a little bit, you can see now grade 4 reading, advanced and proficient, 90.8. Some 93s, some 95s, nothing there that we couldn't achieve. But now the challenge is out to our sites, but look at what those high-performing districts have when it comes to advanced. Really moving kids up from some of those basic and advanced and proficient levels all the way up to the advanced. So that's become our new challenge. Another example, grade 10 reading. 80.9% Hudson advanced and proficient, looking down at the comparisons, and then looking over at the advanced category. And then finally in math, again, advanced and proficient compared to some other larger districts, and then advanced. And now today, or yesterday and today when we were doing this, you'll see it hopefully the next few months, having sites come here and actually sharing now their goals. They're working on school goals, and then in many cases with the larger buildings like the middle and high school, they'll be actually working on either goals for their houses and or grade levels and or departments. But it's very exciting work. Recognize again, we're looking at goals that are 3 to 5 years. This isn't something you do over just the next 12-month period, but they are up for the challenge, and we are going to move Hudson from a great district to an exemplary district. That's our language that we're using today. The other large-scale assessment that takes place is NWA's MAP, or Measures of Academic Progress. This assessment provides us a little different picture because it truly is an assessment that provides growth data. So we can actually take a cohort group. If they were third graders in 2004, fourth graders 2005, we can actually compare that data. It's almost like having, how many of us measured our kids? We kind of had a yardstick along the wall or on the door, and you actually can see those incremental. That's exactly what this test does. You want to see those little steps of growth occur year after year after year. It's that growth model. And the other piece is this data comes back to our teachers within 24 hours. Very quick turnaround. It's a computerized test in grades 3 through 9. And so that information then is very useful when you're looking at improving and guiding instruction, as well as when we start looking at developing more common classroom assessments. It's readily available, and that was some of the discussion today as well. What we did with this data is we tried to give you kind of a blend of two data points, comparing Hudson against the nation, as well as showing that cohort group. So if this student, let's see, these would be, I think, fourth graders. This is the national norm when they were third graders. This is how Hudson performed. The national norm when they were fourth graders, how Hudson performed. And again, you can kind of see that little ladder effect. But we are always above the national norm, and you can even see then from spring to spring, the truest measure, that Hudson has over at least the last 2 years made those incremental steps, even improving over time. 2 data points does not a trend make. It's just our first 2 points. But it just gives us a picture, and we'll just keep adding spring after spring and share that information. Questions? Oh, I have one other. Same kind of piece as reading, it's the math piece. But again, national norm, Hudson, national norm, Hudson for the same students. This data is also available by strand. The strands align with the WKCE strand, so we can really use that information and make some real good decisions.
Thank you, Sandy. Do we have any questions, board members? I have a question regarding when we're looking at these comparisons with these other high-performing school districts. It would seem to me, with all the different variables associated with the NCLB, that you really, when you're doing comparisons, don't you have to sort of have another school district that has a similar composition to really do a fair comparison?
Yeah, we've done a little bit. I'm trying to dig into the state site and make some calls, but we're trying to also add the piece of some demographics. What's their percentage of special ed? A little bit with the socioeconomic. A lot of these districts are very high economic areas. So yeah, that's another piece we want to add to the picture. Correct.
Mr. President,
Superintendent.
I would just like to thank Sandy and our principals for their leadership to move us forward from being a high-performing district. We could be satisfied where we are and really looking at how we compare to the state. But we are raising that bar and having higher expectations for the learning of our students to benefit our students and our community. And so I really appreciate the leadership that Sandy and our principals are bringing to this task. This isn't something you can do in a year. It's very hard when you're already high performing to actually move up. So it takes a period of time, and it also takes a system approach. And so we're also, as an administrative leadership team, working on developing a system to support the efforts of our teachers, our teacher leaders, back in their each individual classroom so that we can support the improved learning of each and every student in our district. Once again, it's over time, and we expect to see those results in the future after we've continued to develop the system.
Mr. Chair, I just
Oh,
real
Mr. Minnick.
quick observation on the school districts that were selected on the comparisons, I'm going to assume that what I'm looking at here are some of the more high-performing districts in the state.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's excellent. I think that's fine. Because I know one of our stated objectives as far as our most recent strategic plan was to be one of the top-performing districts in the state of Wisconsin. So I think these benchmarks are more than valid, and I'm glad to see the bar being raised. I would remind the second comment, I would remind the new board members when we went through the interview process for the selection of the new superintendent, if not the major criteria, it was right at the top, was that we realized as a board that we were doing an excellent job with our high-performing students. But one of the areas that we needed to address was to take that middle group of students, raise the bar, and raise the expectations. And so I'm happy to see this type of benchmarking coming in. The third thing I would just comment on is maybe more just a little bit of an editorial comment. Having been on the board 4 years now, I have to say No Child Left Behind is probably one of the worst pieces of legislation I've seen come out. It almost makes me want to extend an invitation to our 8 representatives and 2 senators, and I'm sure they would ignore an invitation from a little community like Hudson, but you almost have to ask the question, what were you thinking when you cut a deal or made a deal in the back room and put this type of legislation and type of expectations? It doesn't make sense. And then on top of it, to not provide any funding for it, it just makes you wonder what they were thinking. And if any of those 8 representatives and 2 senators are listening tonight, I'd love to have them come into Hudson and tell us what you were thinking. Because the act just doesn't make sense.
Mr. Minnick, thank you for that editorial.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
I'm not sure if I go as I think there's elements of the NCLB that are very laudable and the goals and the attempts to achieve. So I applaud that side of it. I can't disagree with you on the funding piece, because I think, certainly, with what they've put out there, the challenges that they put out there for the school district do require some funding on the part of the, I guess.
Well, I'm sure based on one member from the Hudson School District, I'm sure tomorrow morning there'll be 10 people lined up out the door wanting to talk to us. I'm just sure that will happen.
Anyway, does any other board members have any comments regarding Sandy's report? Thank you, Sandy, and I would imagine that we'll receive regular reports in terms of the progress that we're making along the way. Moving on, we have the 06-07 preliminary budget and goals, and I'll just underscore the fact that Tim is going to present the preliminary budget, and future board meetings will be probably looking at maybe some potential changes to that. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess we have to insert a Finance Committee report before we come to Mr. Erickson's preliminary budget and goals report. Mr. Holland, can you give us a report from the Finance Committee at this time?
I'll try to give Tim a good segue here. The Finance Committee met yesterday. We looked at and spoke of 4, I think, notable agenda items. I'll just try to briefly touch on them. The first one was a recommendation by staff, principal at Lucas, for a trial of an incentive program called the Raider Card. And the essence of this program is to incent students to achieve academically and in other areas of their education. What happens is that they're awarded a Raider Card that gets them into athletic events the following year, finishing after their spring year of the previous school year. Does that make sense? So But in order to attain that, they need to achieve one of three levels. The first is that the students must earn an 8.0 grade point average or higher. An 8.0 grade average is a B, or in the B area, upon completion of the previous school year. The second level is where they can be eligible for this, or they can achieve this, is to have a grade improvement of 1.0 or higher. And the third level, and these are levels A, B, and C, so the C level is a recommendation by one of our staff, teachers, that have observed a student having reached or worked up to their full potential in all classes during the previous semester. In all three of these levels, there are three other criteria that must go along with those initial distinctions. The first is the student cannot have a failing grade for the spring semester. A second one is the student must have good attendance, which means that the student has 0 days of unexcused absences and 0 periods of unexcused absences during the spring semester of the previous year. And the third criterion for all of them is that the student can have no major disciplinary problems as determined by the administration. The objective of this program, as has been explained to us, is two areas. One is to hopefully get more people to come to our athletic events. Not that we're at a league low, but we'd like to have as many as possible supporting those activities. And secondly, and probably most importantly, the incenting of our students to achieve in these areas that I described. So we don't have a baseline. This has been done in the past. It's been done in another school district with some success, as Mr. Lucas has had experience with it. And we are going to try to pilot this this coming fall. So that was the first agenda item. The second item, actually the second and third items run together. They have to do with our 2006-07 budget goals and the preliminary budget, which Tim will talk more about in a bit. But I'm particularly proud of a couple of things. I'm particularly proud of the approach to our budget. Has been outlined and reviewed by the Finance Committee yesterday. We have to balance two things. The first is we have to balance the maintenance of the quality of our education and the commitment to our kids. And I am just thrilled to hear Sandy's report, and we need to protect that. Secondly, we need to balance in good stewardship the money that the owners of this district entrust to us. Those are the two areas that we have to consider. So with that, we've identified some goals, and they were laid out for us, and I think there was generally good feeling about this by the committee. Under the area of being fiscally responsible, we have a goal that our operating budget increase from 2005-06 budget will be under 6% in increase. So the operating budget would be under 6% from the 05-06 budget. Secondly, in that same category, our goal is that the levy increase from 2005-06 levy will be under 5%. And I might note that in the work that I do with the YMCA, and we've sat around in our budget processes now, we're hearing projections of 4.3% inflation in the upcoming year. So to be under 5%, and understanding that 4.3% as an inflationary number means that you just get what you got. You don't move up, you just get what you got. And so to advance the progress that we're talking about, that's going to continue to result in the excellence in this district, And then to maintain the levy at under 5% is admirable. And as I look at it, currently in the preliminary budget, it's at 4.6%. So I should emphasize that this is a preliminary budget. This is not completed. There are factors that we have to still take into consideration and unknowns at this point as well. But we're working very hard to accomplish these goals. And finally, the goal that I'll mention is to maintain a decrease in the mill rate from the 05-06 mill rate. And the projections in the preliminary budget would indicate that the mill rate would drop from 7.77 in 05-06 to 7.46, a 3.99% reduction from the previous year. I guess I'll leave that part, this part of the agenda alone now and move on to just pointing out finally that Mr. Hermson has come to us privately and indicated some potential discrepancies in the reporting of expenses that the board votes on every month. We are seriously wanting to look at that and understand that and make sure that we are in accordance with all proper procedures. And so in that vein, then, we are meeting privately with Mr. Hermanson this next week, Tim, myself, and our superintendent. And so we will make sure that we are clear and accountable for that, and we appreciate his helping us understand any potential discrepancies. And lastly, I just want to finally say a very warm thank you and appreciation to Tim Erickson, who has come in and stepped in an untimely manner at this point in his tenure beginning at this district. This is probably the worst time you could start a job in the position that you've got in the district, with just having to be faced with the construction of this budget and learning all the ins and outs of it. And I know he's put in a lot of time and a lot of hours, and I personally want to express my appreciation publicly to Mr. Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. And I'm not exactly sure if you mentioned that. And as a fellow member of the Finance Committee, the goals that you've outlined are also tied to some assumptions as it relates to district valuations, having an increase of 9%, at least a 9% increase, and that we obtain state aids of approximately $22 million. So assuming that those assumptions bear out, certainly those goals will be achievable. But that said, Mr. Erickson, can you want to give us a report on the budget here?
Sure, thank you. As Tom had gone over some of the goals here, and again, these are estimates based on a lot of state estimates, based on the state's estimate of aid for the district. We have estimates based on property valuations at this point. Oh, sure. Okay, there we go. Sorry. What we're looking at for district valuation is based on a minimum of a 9% increase in total valuation. That's pretty conservative, but given the fact that the real estate market has slowed down, price increases are at a lower level than they have been. We feel it's a pretty safe estimate at this point. The estimates will be available from the state, I believe, later this month, so we will be able to put those numbers in and update what we have here. Based on the projections in the budget and looking at the levy and aid mix, we're looking at state aids that are estimated at about $22,400,000 for the general fund. If these assumptions remain true, then again, and I won't go through all of the goals again because I think Tom's done a good job of going through those, but we're looking, at keeping the budget again under 6% in a total increase. And of course, we're growing in students, so we're trying to be as reasonable as we can there, but and provide programs for students. We'll continue to fund the required annual post-retirement contribution, which is a requirement for districts. Not all districts are able to do that or have the financial ability to do that. This is a very positive thing, because if you don't fund that required contribution annually, your liabilities continue to grow, and so the district doesn't receive a favorable credit rating, and those types of things can happen. So, and then we'd continue to levy under the revenue cap. Going on to the next page, we've got a history on the mill rate and district valuations, a percentage change in those valuations, the total levy from the district, and a percentage change in that levy, as well as a mill rate calculation and the percentage change in the mill rate calculation. And I just focus on the last 2 years, 05, 06, and then our current 06, 07 year. And you can see that 05, 06, the district valuation was about $3.057 billion. And that was an increase of about 11.35% over the previous year. And the district levied a total levy of $23,760,000, which was a 2.4% decrease over the previous year. So that translated into a mill rate calculation of 7.77, which was a 12.4% decrease. This year, we're looking at 06, 07. Again, we've estimated 9% for purposes of our budget discussion. So that would set the district valuation at about $3.3 billion, and which would be about a 9% increase. Again, the district is looking at total levy for general fund and debt service of $24.8 million, which, as Tom had mentioned, puts us in about a 4.67% increase over the previous year. However, the mill rate, based on the assumptions on valuation, brings down the mill rate from 7.77 to 7.46 per thousand, and that's a 3.99% decrease. It's interesting to note when you look at, if you back up to the 04, 05 and look under total levy was $24,345,000. If you go down to what we're projecting that to be for this current year, $24,870,000, I think that's about a 2% increase over those 2 years. So it's pretty manageable. I'm going to flip to the next page if there aren't any questions. And the next page gives you a summary by each individual fund of revenue. And so you can see that we've got 04, 05 activity. That's fine. Those are final numbers, of course. We've got 05, 06 activity. And I just want to remind you, you might want to make a note that those numbers are not final. We're still in the process of closing out the previous fiscal year. So when we're done with that, those numbers will change slightly. And then we've got the 06, 07 budget as we've prepared so far. The general fund, which is Fund 10, that's the first fund there. You can see as we go across the page, we're looking at a budgeted revenues of $44.8 million. And I guess I'm just going to highlight the areas that really affect the levy. So if we go down to Fund 39, which is referendum approved debt service, that's at $3.88 million in revenue. And those would be the two main funds that do affect the tax levy. And so I'm going to go to the next page. And again, this looks similar. This is the flip side. These are the expenditures. And again, general fund, we're looking at $44,863,000. And again, the 05, 06 numbers are not finalized yet, so there will be some changes as we close out the year. And again, the referendum approved debt service has expenditures projected for the 06, 07 budget of $3.8 million. questions on what we have here? And the Finance Committee did go into this in greater detail. There's some additional information in the following pages, but probably in the interest of time, I won't go into all of that detail. I know the Finance Committee's had a chance to go through and discuss those items.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Erickson, and I don't know if any board members have any questions. I know what stands out to me is, you know, and I think you alluded to it briefly, is when you look at the total levy, you know, over the course of, and including the current fiscal year, and again, assuming that the assumptions that we are making bear out, you know, we've pretty much been flatlined when it comes to the total levy. There's no other questions or comments by board members?
Just one question, Mr. Erickson. I'm curious, and I didn't run the numbers, but just off the top of your head, do you have what percentage of our budget is coming from state aids versus the local levy?
I'm going to say at this point, it's roughly, it's pretty close to a 50-50 mix. We're probably a little closer to 51% in aids and 49% in levy. But again, those are preliminary and they could change. So.
And if I recall that percentage has dropped in terms of the state funds available to us versus, you know, what we've had to levy for. So it's as our district becomes wealthier and that valuation increases, that puts us into a different category that actually hurts our funding projections. So,
thank you.
Any other questions, comments? We'll move on to topics for discussion. Item 8, policy 5151, police interview of students at school. Ms. Havish-Elaine.
This new proposed policy is on page 117 of your packet. The policy, police interviews of students at school, is really designed and set up to ensure the safety of all of our students at school. And this policy helps or allows administration and staff to better follow through with keeping our students safe, and spells out in what circumstances they can move forward, and what circumstances that parents need notification. And obviously that would be our primary our primary objective is to involve parents as quickly as possible, but there are situations that merit some faster response on administration's response. This in no way changes the position of our liaison officer or changes the duties of that position. And I, in addition, would just like to recognize the Hudson Police Department for helping us smith this policy so we can best serve the district.
Okay, thank you for that. Board members have any questions, comments regarding this policy? It's just for review at this board meeting. It will come back to us in the future for action.
Mr. President, just one brief question for Ms. Havish-Elaine. Is this basically just, I guess, spelling out what we're currently doing? I know there's no policy that addresses this right now, so nothing is really changing as far as how we're handling these situations. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other comments, questions? If not, that will be coming back to the board. We'll move on to the superintendent's report. We have an updated enrollment information, 0607. Superintendent?
Thank you, Mr. President. I think the first order of business as we look at current enrollment for next year would be to revisit Hazel Reinhardt's fall 2005 enrollment projection. So I'll send around copies of those. And I want to make a clarification on these projections because a question came to me about which number is really the projected number of enrollment for the year. And so I called Hazel today to just check in with her. Someone was questioning the number that I was using, and so I wanted to make sure that it was the correct number and that I had that correct. What I'd like you to look at is, you can see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you look at the column on the left, it starts with 2005 actual, and then it moves down to 5 different categories following 2005-2006 cohort. And if you look at the last category, it says 2006-2007 projection. Now that used to say, before today, estimated. But as I talked to her, she said, I can understand why that might be confusing when it says estimated. And then if you look at the next line, it says 2006-2007 cohort. And if you'd look at kindergarten, that's a different number, which I'll talk about in a minute. But that is not the projection. The projection for the 2006-2007 is right where it says projection. That was, once again, it said estimate. Nothing's changed on this page except that title, and it still represents the same thing. So given that, the kindergarten projection for this coming fall is 388. And then if you just go across that line, you can see first grade, second, third, fourth, and fifth. And if you look at those, you can see that only one grade level, second grade, is above 400 at the present time for 2006, 2007. That's important as I'm going to add some information, but just keep that in mind. One grade level is over 400. Now, if you'd follow the same row across to the other side, you'll see the K-5 enrollment projected for 2006, 2007. And I forgot to bring my glasses, so correct me if it's not right. 2,248. Oh, you think these will work? Ooh, I don't know. Now I can see. Thank you, Mr. Minnick. 6 through 8 is 1,070, and 9 through 12 is 1,667 students. And our K-12 projected enrollment for the coming fall is 4,985 students. Now, if you keep that in front of you, I don't have anything to give you, but I'm just going to give you some numbers as of last Friday. And you have to keep in mind that these numbers will change. And that's a very important statement. These numbers will change. They were of last Friday. We're not sure if they'll go up, if they'll go down, and I'd be really surprised if they stayed the same. We expect that we will get some students who have moved out of the district that we don't know about yet. And so that would make the numbers decrease. We really don't know how many additional students may come in between now and the beginning of school. So there will be changes to these numbers, and I just want to make that very clear. Right now, in kindergarten, we have registered, as of Friday, 418 students. If you remember, Hazel's projection that you just saw was 388. So we're beyond her projection significantly. When we look at our enrollment K-5, once again, Friday, it's 2,365 students, K-5. That's 117 students over Hazel's projection. And you might be interested to know that our building capacity, now that's over 2,365 students. Our building capacity at elementary is 2,352. So we're moving students around, obviously, and space is significantly at a premium at the present time. I would also just point out for our numbers that we have 3 classes, grade levels, who are over 400 as of Friday. Kindergarten is 418. First grade is 421. And second grade is 417. Remember, Hazel had 1. So that's one other thing, capped grade levels. As you know, in our elementary short-term solution, we have capped grade levels when they reach the highest number of the enrollment guideline that you have given, class size guideline. So right now we have, and this could change again, but at the present time on Friday, kindergarten is capped at every school except Holton, and there are 4 seats left in the district. Second grade is capped at every school except Holton, and there are 14 seats left in the district. First grade is capped at Willow River and Rock, and third grade is capped at Rock. Our short-term solution is working. The projections, we're exceeding the projections, and obviously that's a big challenge for us in any kind of short-term solution. We, once again, don't know if these are the accurate numbers that we will have on the first day of school, but it is a challenge. Jen Ninneman is working very hard with principals and secretaries to manage these numbers and let parents know where they will be, where their children will be attending school. And then I just want to let you know, in regard to that short-term elementary solution, as of Friday, we have 58 elementary students who are being transported to other schools. So they are not attending their resident school. They will be attending a different school. And we will be transporting those students out of their attendance area to that school. Now, some of those have volunteered, a few of those have volunteered, but most of them are new move-ins who are being transported to other schools, filling up the space that we have. Any questions on elementary before I move on to middle school? Cindy?
What will we do with the 5th kindergarten?
Oh, when we go beyond the 4?
Yeah.
We'll have to talk about that. We have some ideas, but I'd rather not share them yet at this point until we talk a little further. We're hoping, obviously, that that doesn't occur at this point for next year. But if it does, we'll have to come back to you and let you know what our recommendations are for that. It may be that we need to increase that 22, that number of 22. For a short-term solution, I mean, just for a short period of time until there is additional space. Let's see, moving on to middle school. The enrollment at the present time, and that actually is today's enrollment, is 1,110 students. Hazel Reinhardt's projection was 1,070. So we're 40 students over that projection today. At the high school, the enrollment today is 1,703 students. And Hazel's projection, we're 36 students over that projection. Obviously, this is important information in our planning, as Ms. Crimmins pointed out, looking at how many seats we do have left. Once again, these are, and I continue to reiterate, these are numbers as of Friday and today at the middle school and high school, and we do expect them to change. We just don't know what they're going to be the first day of school. So we're continuing to adjust, and I really thank Monica in the transportation department, and Ms. Ninneman, please extend that to her, because she's done a very good job of working out the transportation for our students that we are moving out of their elementary attendance areas. And she's working very hard to keep those routes for all students an hour or less, as the policy says. And when I asked her about what that looked like, would students be going to another school or going to their home school, be transported to their home school, and then transferring and getting on another bus? And thanks to Monica's very hard work, we have no students that are doing that. They are being picked up and then taken to the school that they will be attending.
Thank you for that report. Any questions, comments from board members? It's evident based on those projections and the numbers that are coming in, we certainly have some challenges before us as a board. You know, we're hopefully going to be addressing some of those issues with some of the options that we talked about earlier, but even then, you know, though that type of a solution is a few years out, so we certainly are going to be looking for some answers to the shorter term needs that we have. The next item, citizens request to speak to the board. We do have one item from Mr. Marion Shaw, and it's regarding the June 14, 2005 board meeting. Marion?
I appreciate the opportunity. Marion Shaw, Town of Hudson. And really, I just wanted to ask once again, I spoke at the July board meeting asking about some questions that I had surrounding the June 14, 2005 board meeting, the activities that took place, and those questions hadn't been answered yet, so I'm just asking the board again, second time here, to see if somebody can respond to the questions that I raised in July. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any comments? Certainly take that information and we'll discuss it. And get back to you. Meeting dates. In your board packet, we have 2006 tentative meeting dates before you. We've added a few more meetings between now and the end of the year based on the workload that we have. Do board members have any questions, comments regarding those dates? If you do, certainly raise them now or possibly when you have your calendars in front of you. If you want to contact myself or Mary, we'll take those into consideration as we firm up these dates. That said, the next item on the agenda is to adjourn to closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statutes 19.85 1C, considering employment data of a teacher and considering employment data of an employee, and for the purpose of negotiations of labor contracts and preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems and investigation of charges against specific persons. I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
We have a motion from Ms. Habish-Aline. Do I have a second?